Behind the latticed windows of Topkapi Palace, where sunlight fractured through gilded grills, a question still hangs in the air. What happened to the women who once ruled the most powerful court in the Islamic world, when their beauty faded or their political value expired? The Ottoman Imperial Harem, the Harem-I Humayun, was never merely a place of luxury or desire. It was a political machine, a silent battlefield where consorts, concubines, and mothers of sultans maneuvered carefully, knowing a single shift in power could erase them. Before we go further, subscribe now, because this story reveals what history prefers to keep locked behind palace walls. Behind the veil of influence lay a darker truth: lifelong confinement. Women who had once borne heirs or rivaled others for the sultan's favor could be sealed inside the golden cage, a section of the harem where the outside world ceased to exist. No crime was required. Simply being the mother, sister, or consort of a prince who might one day threaten the reigning sultan was enough to condemn a woman to decades of isolation. The mother of Sultan Mustafa I endured exactly this fate. After her son was deposed, her apartments were sealed, her movements tracked, her voice erased. She lived not in exile, but in gilded captivity. There were no chains, no visible wounds. Instead came something slower and more enduring: psychological erasure. Days blurred together. Letters were censored. Windows faced stone walls. Servants listened, reported, vanished. These women wore finery meant to be seen, yet were never seen again. Some former consorts of Murad IV were said to spend the rest of their lives without ever glimpsing the Bosphorus again. Their names faded from records, but their silence still clings to the palace stone. And enforcing that silence was another power entirely. Not always the sultan, but the man who carried the whip. Known as the Kisler Agassi, the chief black eunuch was far more than a guard. He was the absolute master of discipline, secrecy, and order within the imperial harem. Taken as boys through brutal slave networks, castrated, and raised without family or future, these men were shaped into instruments of control. By the 17th century, the chief black eunuch wielded influence rivaling grand viziers. He controlled access to the sultan, oversaw the women's education, and enforced obedience with precision. When rules were broken, it was not the sultan who intervened, it was the eunuchs. Whippings delivered with braided leather or palm canes echoed softly through marble corridors. No screams carried beyond the walls. Punishment was quiet, efficient, reported directly to the Valide sultan, who could order exile, or worse. Yet even the eunuchs were prisoners of the same system, forbidden to leave unless dismissed or dying, serving a machine that demanded control at any cost. And when discipline required pain without visible damage, there was one punishment feared above all others: falaka, bastinado, the beating beneath the veil. Within the hidden chambers of the harem, feet were bound, lifted, and struck with wooden rods. The face remained untouched, beauty preserved, will destroyed. Ottoman chroniclers recorded that victims often could not walk for days, sometimes weeks. The punishment left little evidence, only swelling, bruising, and silence. Bastinado was rarely carried out in places of ceremony. It happened in laundry rooms, secluded courtyards, or servant quarters, far from the sultan's eyes, but never beyond his authority. The punishment was not merely physical. It was instructional. Pain carved itself into memory. Every step taken afterward, slow, cautious, unsteady, reinforced the lesson. Obedience was not requested. It was enforced. In the Ottoman court, even death was refined. Mercy, when it came, arrived wrapped in silk. Execution by bowstring strangulation was the empire's preferred method for eliminating royalty, high-ranking officials, and dangerous figures without spilling blood. Blood was considered dishonorable. Silence was not. Within the palace, this method extended into the harem itself, reserved for women whose ambition, alliances, or influence threatened the balance of power. A condemned concubine or consort was never publicly accused. There were no trials, no crowds. Decisions followed secret inquiries, whispered reports, or a single sentence from the Valide sultan. The execution was carried out at night. A eunuch entered quietly. A silk cord was placed around the neck. Death came without spectacle. The body disappeared before dawn. Records were brief, sometimes erased entirely. Her name vanished from palace registers. Her chambers were reassigned. Her jewelry redistributed. It was as if she had never existed. This was called honor. A contradiction sustained by power alone. For the women of the harem, it was a constant, unspoken warning. Rank offered no immunity. Favor expired. Influence attracted danger. One of the most chilling examples emerged during the rise of Roxolana in the 16th century. As her authority grew, rival consorts vanished. No executions were officially recorded. None were needed. In the palace, disappearance was explanation enough. The Ottoman harem was never merely a place of beauty or indulgence. It was a closed system of power, fear, and silence. A world where ambition was restrained by silk and discipline enforced without witnesses. Behind veils and gilded walls, royal women lived under rules that could not be questioned and punishments that could not be spoken. These were not historical footnotes. They were mechanisms of control that shaped dynasties and redirected empires. Centuries later, the echoes remain, of footsteps taken in pain, of rivalries ended without a sound, of lives erased by whispers. The harem was a world where beauty was currency, obedience was survival, and silence was the only protection.